Now they have also added a new feature on the dual camera device here called Portrait, and this is pretty amazing. So you'll see there at the bottom it says move farther away to get the depth effect. So as I pull back here, it will eventually detect that mug in the shot, and it will blur out the background, as you can see, and I can take a picture of it and get an almost SLR-like image here. Let me pull up the image that it just took. And what's nice about this is that it gives you the image with it blurred out, but also what it saw initially. So you get an idea as to exactly what it did. And I'm finding it to be very, very accurate. It's not perfect. You can see some issues with the edges there around the mug, but if you were to upload this to Facebook, I think your friends will be pretty impressed with it, especially because it came out of a smartphone. And what this is doing is it's using both cameras to not only pull down the images, but also get a sense as to how far the mug is away from the camera, and then really be more able to accurately blur out the background. And it's a pretty convincing effect. And right now I'm using the beta version of iOS, so this is not fully baked yet. It was kind of unusual for Apple to announce a feature that is not actually available on the phone when you buy it. You have to actually go and subscribe to the beta channel of their operating system to get this portrait feature, but it's working pretty nicely. Here's a few more images. So here's one of my dog. This is the before image. You will see throughout all of these images that there's always going to be some issues around the edges. That's the one thing I'm sure they're going to be trying to get as good as possible when this comes out of beta. So you will see some edging issues as we move through all of these photos here. So here's another good one of some flowers. When I switch over to the blurred out version, you can see it did a very nice job with this one, but again, you'll see some softness and some wackiness around the edges of each of these images. It looks better than what I could do in Photoshop, but it won't be perfect. Hair is always difficult, especially when you have strands of hair like you have down here. And what you'll see when we switch over to the blurred out version of this image is that it does a decent job, but not all the way. So some of those strands of hair get kind of lost in its blur transition there. But again, on Facebook or something, someone's really not going to notice the difference. I think it's going to be a pretty believable image that this might have been shot with a camera better than maybe your smartphone. So that was a pretty good example there. What you will see, though, are some issues when you get into more complexity. So here we've got a potted plant with a lot of stems and a lot of things going on in the picture. When I switch over to the blurred version, you can see that right over here, this stem is going to disappear completely. So there are going to be some glitches that complex images will throw at you when you're trying to get them blurred out. So it's not going to be perfect for every scenario, but I think for people and maybe a flower by itself, where you have very defined edges, it should have a better time detecting things. This one's a very challenging image because we have a hook here with the bird feeder hanging off of it. And you'll see when we switch over to the blurred out version that the hanger for the bird feeder is completely messed up because it just doesn't see it in the image because the background is kind of dark. It just has a hard time getting that image straight there. So the hook actually does a pretty good job with. There are some little issues around the edges there, but it did a nicer job with that than it did with the hanger for the bird feeder, but that's the kind of stuff you'll run into. Low light is not so great. So this is the before image off of that 2.8 lens. A lot of noise in the picture, again, because that lens has not as wide of an aperture as the wide angle lens does. So when we switch to the blurred out version, it will get rid of a lot of the background, but the noisiness in the foreground remains, and a big strand of her hair gets kind of lost in that noise there. So I think the way this will work the best is when you've got, again, something very distinct, like a person who's clearly in front of the background, and you have good lighting also so that the software can differentiate the background from the foreground. It is using the cameras to try to determine distance, but it's also looking at the image itself and kind of combining all that stuff together to do what you're seeing here. This is not an easy thing to do. It's pretty remarkable that they can program this thing to do this and then get it into a phone's processor, but that's what it's like living in the future, I guess. We looked at a dual camera device from Huawei a few weeks ago called the Honor 8, and it does a similar function but not as well. So you can see what a lot of software engineering will do when you're trying to do some crazy stuff with these dual cameras. And this is still in beta, so I'm eager to come back to this after they've had some time to work with this and tweak it and see what the final version looks like. This channel is brought to you by my Patreon supporters. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/Patreon to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.